When my tears turn to laughter, that child long ago, my soul starts to linger. It's home, I know. If you catch me daydreaming now and forever, thoughts are carrying me alone to that place we call home. Down that long road, throughout life we roam.
If ever there was a place in Canada that epitomizes our history, this is it. Natural resources developed by outside interests, railway building fueled by politics, and all of the related and today environmentally touchy industries like smelting, lumbering. They've had it all. But then, and not so long ago, things began to change. At a time when closures and loss of employment painted a pretty precarious future, the folks here reaffirmed a belief in their town, counting on its most important assets, its people, a built heritage second to none. All of this in an unmatched setting. Well, when the smoke cleared, Phoenix-like, so to speak, rose the city of today, a Renaissance city in the heart of the Kootenay district of British Columbia. Nelson, the Queen City of the Kootenays. Protected, she lies among ancient mountains, the 100-kilometer Kootenay Lake. A small place in a large setting, a setting that draws, whether by design or whimsy, or like Wendy Herbison, because there are roots here. It draws.
When I first came here after the professional life, I didn't feel like playing very much, frankly. I was really tired of it. And so it's come back, and I'm glad of that. It took me a while, and I'm just feeling now like I really enjoy playing again.
In the case of Bill Sloan, you could say coming here was something of destiny.
Because I was a timber cruiser, I knew the area intimately because I had cruised a lot of it. The back roads, the trails. In fact, I got into history in part because of examining, researching the old Indian and mining trails and wondering where they led and why they were built where they were. Those were the initial, and they're probably still the most important reasons why I'm hooked on the Kootenays.
Following a long-established pattern of northward migration, an artist whose energies contributed to the makeover of the place, Robert Inwood.
I guess the things that I like certainly about the area still is that, you know, there is a bit of a sense of the frontier to it, and the fact that, you know, there was a chance here to kind of make a difference, to, you know, change the philosophy and the way that people look at their heritage. The more that I work with the old buildings, kind of the more you learn about them as they uncover their secrets to you there.
The natural world of mountain and valley is John Carter's universe.
Certainly covered a lot of the ground around the West Kootenays here, both when I was working for BC Parks as a ranger. It was one of my jobs to go around and monitor use, and on the weekends and holidays I'd either be out with friends or family, canoeing, hiking, skiing, whatever else it was, pretty well any spare time I had. Certainly have been to a lot of the country around here, but there is lots that's new and hasn't been explored.
Located in southeastern British Columbia, 65 kilometers north of the border with Washington State, Nelson has historically been influenced by the United States. Today, with its population of 9,500, the city maintains an earlier established role as commercial, administrative, and distribution center. Living here can mean coming full circle for some whose experiences have been devoted to the arts.
You know, it's very hard for a 5-year-old to concentrate for very long, but if they can stand and concentrate for a half-hour lesson or a 45 minutes of group class, then, you know, they're gaining something in that department too. And I think music enriches their lives in a lot of ways. And discipline and concentration. So I hope that I'm adding something to their lives and giving something back. My family moved to Argenta, which is a small community at the north end of Kootenay Lake, when I was in my high school years, and we built a house there, and it was a place where I had spent a lot of summer vacations, and I went to UBC and did a Bachelor of Music degree there, and after that joined the Vancouver Symphony, and I was there for 12 years and a member of the Baroque Strings, which was a group started by Norman Nelson, who was the concertmaster in those days. So I gained a lot of experience, especially from Norman. And it was just a very busy life and a lot of commuting back and forth because I never lived right in Vancouver. I was always somewhere out on the outskirts where I could have a garden and grow vegetables to feed my kids. And so after a lot of years of doing that, I just got the feeling like I'd like to have a change. And look toward Nelson, of course, because there's always so much going on here, musically, culturally.
Well, I came up in the early 1970s, and I was I came out of the States, out of California, and I was part of, I guess, one of the first back to the land movements there, and just was really taken with the environment here. And at the time, the people that I came to visit were all building log cabins and were living without electricity, and it was really like stepping back about 100 years in time, which quite appealed to my romantic nature at the time. Nelson to us at that point was only maybe went into town once a month or so, and it was just the town, you know. It had you know, its usual smattering of stores, and there was a sawmill there that was quite smoky, so that a lot of the times when you drove into town, basically you just saw this kind of pall of smoke lying over the lake, and you couldn't really see the city all that much. And it wasn't really personally until I began to get interested and involved with construction work and design work that I really started to take notice of the interesting architecture that was around.
2,000 years in advance of the Aztec and Inca cultures in South America, here, First Nations found sanctity in the holiness of the mountains.
The native people who occupied this area are part of two large cultural groups, the Kootenai and the Salishan. And the Salishan people were therefore what's called riverine, or people who made their living from salmon and from resources that were originally in the sea. They were originally coastal and then moved up the river following the salmon. The Slocan Valley, for instance, is one of the major, maybe spiritual centers for the Salish. Some archaeologists believe, because of the number of petroglyphs and rock paintings, they indicate a spiritual draw to that area.
I guess I particularly enjoy taking people out who haven't been out in the mountains a lot, showing them around and pointing out glaciers and lakes and valleys and so on that is special to me, and they, of course, are intrigued with them too. Virtually every trail, other than it's been constructed in the last 10 or 15 years by people like myself or other people, are all mining trails, pretty well constructed by the miners, most of them at the turn of the century or even in the 1800s, late 1800s. If you have a keen eye and hike some of them perhaps before a lot of other people have, you get to pick up various pieces of mining relics that have been left by the edge of the trail. And 20 years ago or more, you would still see some of the old clothes. In fact, the Silver Spray cabin that we dismantled this summer, when the first few years I hiked in there, the old clothes that the miners used back in the 30s were still hanging on the pegs on the wall. So it was like walking into, you know, everything being turned back about 40 or 50 years.
The mountains are a maze of mining history.
We're coming now to the Queen Victoria mine. The mine itself was discovered in 1896, but it wasn't actually mined until 1907. Okay, so look at
And
the
geologist
cliffs.
Leslie Anderton
Look at the colours.
guides her students through the legends of the
So what you're
Selkirks.
looking for is any signs on the rock that would indicate that there was something here. So if you look up at the stains right there, as a prospector, would that have interested you? What does that staining represent? Iron oxide. And see the green staining? Yeah, see the malachite? Malachite is the presence of what? Copper. And so that, in fact, is what they were looking for.
The earliest miners are part of like a ripple in a pond when you drop the rock into the mining area of the Sierras with the California Gold Rush in 1849. There are a series of waves that move up through as these miners move up into the Kootenays. Most of the people who are coming into the Kootenays, into the Upper Columbia region, are coming from the U.S.
In late summer 1886, a 15-man party left Colville, Washington on a gold prospecting trip. Following a creek feeding the Salmon River south of Kootenay Lake, their eventual discovery would launch a frontier drama, Pathos, a political power play that saw Canadian nationalism contest the American Inland Empire based in Spokane. Through it all rose the Nelson of today. It is a meeting of two valleys along which land traffic from the west and south will have to come. By September of 1887, Winslow and brother Osner Hall had stumbled onto a fortune on Toad Mountain, which became the Silver King Mine. R.T. Lowry would write, "The camp was new and short of frills, boiled shirts, parsons, lawyers, and prohibition orators. It has plenty of whiskey, a few canary birds, and several pianos." A copper-silver bonanza was on.
Now, exploration in the Nelson area began really in the 1880s. But Nelson really got off the ground in the 1890s. And out of this deposit, despite the fact it's fairly small, they took out 1.4 million pounds of copper.
The marriage of American entrepreneur to British capitalist started out in Nelson's first hotel, a 3-room tent with dining room and bar. By 1894, a sawmill cranked out an instant town.
It had a kind of a key location which allowed it to establish a prosperity and to outlast the initial boom times of the silver rush and to carry on into later years. So from this early type of tent town, it then grew into pretty much a wooden city. And then when the municipality was incorporated in 1897, one of the first bylaws was to do away with the wooden party walls, saying that any building that was then built subsequently had to have masonry walls. And that was one of the things, again, that saved the town from being obliterated by fire.
By the turn of the century, the future seemed guaranteed. British Columbia's fourth largest city then boasted an electric streetcar, lumber mill, smelter, tied to a burgeoning transportation network.
The initial mining was done with quite primitive means. They used horses and trail. Then the horses were used to carry cable up, and they built a tram line. The concentrates, the result of the smelting process, then were hauled away mainly by steamboat, by paddle wheeler. So paddle wheelers were an important part of the life of Nelson until at least World War II.
In a world of intricate scale models, Bert Learmonth relives an era that witnessed the launching of a fleet of some 18 vessels. Within a few short years, Nelson became a port of entry on the seasonal route that originated at Bonner's Ferry in Idaho. British remittance men, Chinese, Scandinavian, the Duke of Orrs. The West Kootenays played host to a population of newcomers.
Other noticeable social groupings who arrive around the turn of the century, the most notable maybe is the Italian people in Trail, who had originally been part of the railway construction. They had been, along with Ukrainians and Irish, involved in building the Crow's Nest Pass Railway.
The CPR branch line sidetracked ore carried to U.S. smelters on U.S. railways. By 1906, a new Canadian processor at Trail, BC, squashed American dominance of the Kootenays. But by then, the heyday was over.
And with that decline, Nelson becomes more attractive as a stable community, as a place for family life. It was already becoming a retail center. And the accident that it had a mill. I mean, the mill was a negative factor for years, but it did provide diversity and gave some kind of stability to the community when they weren't all tied to mining.
Somehow Nelson attracted a cultural element. It may have been because it became a government seat. And so I think some of the rough and tumble mining style was a bit tempered.
At its peak, the West Kootenays had over 800 working mines, including one of the largest lead-zinc operations in the world. Remnants of that heyday, such as this cabin, built at the Silver Spray mine early this century, take on new meaning. Situated in what is now Kokanee Glacier Park, the building, restored by volunteers, will see a second life as a facility for hikers and skiers.
Busy yet, eh, John?
Well, we're getting her here. Big project. Bigger than we thought, Doug.
Certainly was.
Reclaiming built heritage has been going on since the 1970s. In a city that is called the heritage capital of British Columbia, buildings find new and conventional uses, like a recent brewery that reclaimed a site built for that purpose in 1893. Or a former muffler shop, come bookstore cafe. Rejuvenation of Nelson's architecture is a story of irony, with its opening chapters set at the end of World War I.
The region goes into a decline in the 20s. The smelters in Grand Forks and Boundary shut down. So I think the period between 1920 and the 1970s is a period of very static. And part of the reason why Nelson has a great attraction, and I sometimes say this to my students and offend their sensibilities a bit, it's an artifact. It basically had no development.
What happened to Nelson was it just, the economy froze in a sense, and that was a real blessing in disguise to the heritage buildings, because there were no development pressures really pushing for those older structures to be torn down. And by default, more than, I suppose, anybody really wanting to preserve them, they mostly maintained quite a high percentage of them in the street. One of the things that's interesting about Nelson is that it had actually, it's a little bit isolated from the rest of eastern Canada, and more of its influences architecturally came from the west, from Victoria and Vancouver, and also up from the south, out of Washington, Spokane, Seattle. So the styles were a little bit behind the times. It was a kind of a last fling of the high Victorian. We really have seen now that that visual, physical change seems to have been a real key factor in what has made the town so attractive.
A small place in a large setting.
The landscape is just very beautiful and very stunning, and I haven't seen anything anywhere that's as beautiful. I think all those things influence one musically, though I don't sense a really direct link as a painter would, seeing a landscape and then wanting to recreate on a canvas what was there, you know. But I think any of those experiences with nature, climbing a mountain, and I mean the thrill that I had when I climbed Mount Willett and looked at this sea of peaks for miles and miles and miles, it was just thrilling. Yeah, it stirs all sorts of feelings, which then come through in your music.
I've been several different places in the world, particularly the South Pacific, and it certainly appeals to me, and it does about November when it's raining in the Kootenays, but I don't think I could live anywhere for very long where there was only one season. I really enjoy the 4 seasons, and particularly I enjoy showing other people nature and showing people special areas.
The more that I work with the old buildings, kind of the more you learn about them as they uncover their secrets to you there. And I still try to, you know, keep a sense of my art in the whole thing. Oftentimes when I come into a new community, they're sort of like a blank canvas to me, and I try to match and work the colors much as an artist would if you were developing a composition and a scene there, so that ideally the whole town integrates nicely together when you're finished. Just hope to be able to keep living here on into the future. I feel like I've really, you know, found kind of the perfect place for me.
In one phrase, I'm a lifer. There's no, there's little question. I've lived elsewhere. I've lived in Kingston, Ontario, and I've lived in Victoria, BC, and lots of places in between, Winnipeg, the Northwest Territories, and I love the North, but I come back here.
Here to an age-old valley, energized by mountains around. Yes, here, where a small place is a large place. Its heartbeat, the unspoken draw. Nelson, the Queen City of the Kootenays.
Down that long road, through our